Thank you very much. I would like to call this meeting of the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources to order. Members, before we begin, a quick reminder to please be sure to mute your microphone when you're not speaking so that we can minimize background noise. And with that, will the Secretary please take the roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson?
Here.
Assemblywoman Black?
Here.
Assemblywoman Brown May?
Here.
Assemblywoman Carlton?
Here.
Assemblywoman Cohen? Assemblyman Ellison?
Present.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez?
Here.
Assemblywoman Hanson?
Here.
Assemblywoman Martinez?
Present.
Assemblywoman Titus?
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler?
Here.
Chair Watts?
Here. Thank you. Please mark Vice Chair Cohen present as she arrives. With that, we have a quorum and we can begin with our agenda. We have one presentation and one bill hearing, our first bill hearing on the agenda today. Before we start, I'll go through a couple of quick housekeeping announcements, which we always do at the start of our meetings. Members of the public may provide testimony in a variety of ways. Information on how to participate can be found on every meeting agenda and on the help page of the legislative website, which can also be accessed from a header that's at the top of every page on the legislature's website. Participants must register to participate and can submit opinion polls or sign up to testify via video conference or phone. Written comments can also be emailed to asmnr@asm.state.nv.us before, during, or up to 48 hours after the meeting. Committee exhibits or amendments must be submitted electronically in PDF form to our committee manager no later than 4 p.m. on the business day prior to the meeting, so 24 hours in advance. Any amendments must include the bill number, a statement of intent, and contact information. All exhibits that are submitted can be found on the Nevada Legislature's website, and you can also sign up for personalized legislative tracking on that site. We ask that public comments be kept to 2 minutes so all speakers can be accommodated and we can get through the agenda in a timely fashion. Speakers are urged to avoid repetition of comments made by previous speakers. And finally, a reminder that it's unlawful for any person to knowingly misrepresent the facts when testifying before a legislative committee. When we do along with the motion or second for the clarity of the record. Let's see, with that, we will now go to the first item on our agenda, which is an overview by the State Department of Agriculture. So Director Ott, please go ahead and begin whenever you are ready and introduce yourself for the record.
Right. Thank you so much, Chairman Watts and member of the committee. My name is Jennifer Ott. I'm the Director for the Department of Agriculture, and I am absolutely pleased to present to you an overview of the department today and describe a little bit about the work that the men and women of the department do for the state of Nevada. Let's see. The mission of the Department of Agriculture is to preserve, protect, and promote Nevada agriculture. And we do that through our 5 divisions at the department: our administration division, our plant industry division, our animal industry division, division of consumer equitability, and our food and nutrition division. The Department of Agriculture has several responsibilities throughout the supply chain, the food supply chain in the state of Nevada, starting off from planting and working with farmers for food crops, seeds for forage to make sure they're free of noxious weeds, to livestock and production animals, through transportation and making sure that crops and livestock get to the proper locations with high quality fuel that meets regulatory standards, We work in processing, especially in the dairy industry, to go over those food safety guidelines and ensure food safety and quality. We work with weights and measures. This is really a consumer protection activity so that we ensure that Nevadans are getting what they pay for. When you are buying a pound, it's actually a pound, and so forth. To distribution, much of our distribution activities is in our food insecure sector to assist food banks, food pantries, and community organizations, and to trade assistance and economic and workforce development. So we work with farmers, ranchers, manufacturers of food products or fiber products to be introduced to new buyers. And over the next couple of years, we're really going to be working in our economic development and workforce development to ensure that our food industries has the best of opportunities possible to them, and also to make sure that they have an adequate workforce to support the food supply chain in the state. The economic impact of agriculture in the state for 2020 is $4.71 billion. What you would think of as the traditional agriculture segment of ranching and farming had an economic input of $787.8 million. And our food and beverage manufacturing segment had $3.925 billion of economic impact. That's slightly down from 2019 for two reasons. Of course, the pandemic did have an effect on that. The agriculture industry specifically did receive a bit of federal assistance, quite a bit of federal assistance, so that the impact of the pandemic on the agriculture sector was not as great. It was felt, but that assistance did help. And then it was also a decrease due to trade policies that have been made it difficult over the last couple of years to form those trade relationships that we've enjoyed in the past. And so we're hoping over the next several years that those numbers will increase. The economic impact employs, or the agriculture sector employs, over 18,000 people in the state for $113.2 million worth of wages. Oh, and actually, before I go on, I just want to make a quick plug. Each of you and all of the legislature should have received our economic analysis in your inboxes. So it is full of data about agriculture and all of the impacts broken down by county, and also our top trading countries and our biennial report. I also followed up with an email that had electronic links to those. So please look out for those documents. They are full of really great information. So the department has a Board of Agriculture. The board was created by NRS 561. The board establishes policies of the department and adopts regulations as authorized by the board for the department to operate and carry out laws and provisions administered by the department. The board is made up of 11 members, and I won't read them off here, but here is a list of all of the members and their segments that they're designated to be from. And I'm going to go into a little bit about each of the divisions of the department. Because of time constraints, I'll only highlight some of our programs, not to say that one is more important than the other. It's just I've selected a few that you might be seeing bills about or might have questions about. So always feel free to contact me if you have any questions about any of our programs. But I'll start with the Animal Industry Division. Our Animal Industry Division is responsible for animal disease detection, prevention, food safety, livestock identification, livestock theft prevention, commercial feed, and on down a lot of the activities of the animal industry and livestock industry. We have 5 programs in the division. Our livestock inspection program is responsible for tracking the movement of livestock across Nevada and between states for health purposes. So this is what we would call our brand inspection program. And this is really to make sure that our livestock are healthy as they're moved across the state and across state lines. Our agriculture enforcement programs prevents agricultural products that have not met the requirements of plant or animal health and livestock inspection from entering or exiting the state. Our agricultural livestock enforcement, or our agriculture enforcement folks also assist law enforcement on matters and are the subject matter experts for any agricultural laws. Our animal disease laboratory monitors diseases that can be transmitted from animals to humans. We call those zoonotic diseases, as well as diseases impacting safe transport of livestock. Our Division of Consumer Equitability ensures quality of motor fuel and lubricants and consistency in commercial transactions by regulating devices used to determine weight and volume. Our Weights and Measures program inspects and certifies weighing and measuring devices. Our metrology program maintains traceability of Nevada's primary weight and volume standards and making sure they're aligned with national standards. And our petroleum technology program, including our petroleum technology laboratory, ensures fuel sold at retail facilities meets regulatory requirements. Our Food and Nutrition Division administers federal funds to provide access to healthy food for Nevada's children, seniors, and food insecure populations. And we have three main segments of our Food and Nutrition Division. And the first segment of that is our child nutrition programs. We have several federally funded programs that we administer in the state. Our most well-known programs that get a lot of conversation, of course, is our National School Lunch and National School Breakfast programs that the department works with all of the schools across the state to administer. That also includes our summer food service program that we deployed to meet the needs of school children during the pandemic. So even though it is the summer food service program, it is deployed not during summertime because it is a grab and go program, which made it appropriate for the schools that were doing distance learning or of course, being COVID compliant. And our fresh fruit and vegetable program increases availability of fresh fruits and vegetables in elementary schools. Our special milk program provides milk to children who don't participate in any other federal program. And we provide that milk through elementary schools and also through child care centers as well. The other two segments of the Food and Nutrition Division is our senior nutrition programs, and the commodity supplemental food program is what you would know as senior food boxes, and those boxes supplement food insecure senior diets with nutritious foods that are procured through USDA funds. And our senior farmers market nutrition program that provides low-income seniors with coupon books to use as cash at Nevada farmers market so that they are able to purchase their own fresh fruits and vegetables. We have our community support programs. The TFAP program, Emergency Food Assistance Program, is a program that you have seen probably most talked about during the pandemic. That would be considered our food bank program. And that is working with food banks and food pantries to provide food assistance to food insecure populations. And then also our food distribution on Indian reservations programs. And that provides monthly food boxes to individuals in 11 tribes, colonies, and reservations across the state. Our Plant Industry Division protects Nevada agriculture, the public, workers, and the environment through education, inspection, and certification. And again, the Plant Industry Division is another large division. And so that is broken up into three segments. Our first segment is crop production. Covering crop production, we have our export certification program. And this program provides mandatory inspection and certification for plants and plant products exported out of state and out of the country. As you can see, we've seen an increase in exported products from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 20, and we're anticipating and seeing another increase in fiscal year 21, much of that being exported out of the country. And also crop production, we include our hemp program. I bring that up. We're seeing a lot of bills on CBD this legislative session, and we had quite a boom of hemp until about 2020, and in 2020 we have seen a decline in hemp production. That is for two reasons. The first is that at the federal level, there has been some regulatory there's been some unsurety in the regulatory area on the federal level. The final rules on hemp didn't come out until this January. And so it made it difficult for those that are wanting to plant or invest in the hemp industry to have some surety about their crop being able to get to market. The second portion of that is that we have seen a decline in CBD prices. And so it is not nearly as a profitable industry as it was through 2019. The next segment is plant health. We have several programs in the plant health area. Our noxious weed program is in charge of preventing, controlling, and managing invasive weed species on both public lands and private lands. And we do that through partnerships with federal entities, partnerships with counties, and with private landowners. Our entomology program, they are charged with preventing the entry and spread of harmful exotic pests. They do this through identification, field surveys, and enforcement of state and federal quarantines and regulations. And then the plant pathology program is the sister program there. They do everything entomology does, but plant diseases instead of plant pests. And our final segment for the plant industry division is environmental protection. Our environmental services program is charged with protecting the environment and human health from the effects of pesticide misuse. This program and these employees monitor the waterways in Nevada to make sure that there is no pesticide runoff into our waterways. Our pest control program licenses and monitors pest control companies and individuals for compliance with state and federal laws. And our drought initiative works with several partners to provide proactive long-term strategies to make Nevada's agricultural and ranching resources resilient to the impacts of prolonged drought. And finally, our administration division. This division is really the support hub of all of our divisions within the department. I spoke a little bit about our trade program, but I'll highlight it here as well. As our global trade program assists farmers, ranchers, and food manufacturers to enter and grow into international markets. We provide educational seminars. We assist them in going on trade missions and making market assessments so that they can make the right decisions when entering in and looking for buyers. And with that, thank you so much. That concludes my presentation. And Chairman Watts, I'm available if you need me.
Wonderful. Thank you for that overview, Director Ott. It's clear that your department handles quite a bit, and we appreciate you giving us a quick overview so that we can also proceed through the rest of our agenda. We do have a couple of questions so far, and I will start off with Assemblywoman Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Ms. Ott, when you were going at the very beginning of your presentation, you were talking about the food chain, the food supply. And earlier last year, when the shutdown happened, there were some definite issues in the food supply chain. And not only just for families, but being a food pantry person, it was very difficult to get certain items. Have you guys done a little analysis on what actually happened? How did, and I can only speak for Southern Nevada, how did Southern Nevada ended up in a position to where we could not get the food supplies that we needed? I actually had a group bring in food from California for me. That's how bad it was. So I'd like to know if we're looking at what happens so that it doesn't happen again.
Yes, absolutely. Jennifer Ott for the record. It was a perfect storm, really, of food supply issues. There were a lot of issues on the processing ends with, companies shutting down because of COVID outbreaks, which affected this food supply. The closure of restaurants across the United States led food processing. Manufacturers had to pivot, and they can't pivot that quickly. And so when we have entities that are packaging for restaurants, and we were seeing shortages in our grocery stores, those packaging items do not look the same. And so it took a while for those companies to pivot. There were problems with transportation, and there were logistical problems with warehouses having outbreaks and those kinds of items. And so, I always liken the food system in the United States to this cruise ship. And even if we turn off or, if we stop an engine or two, or even if we stop the whole engine, it takes a long time for it to come to a stop. And while it's coming to a stop, manufacturers, logistics groups are all pivoting to fill in the need. And so that was what was happening over that really 2 months of a shortage, especially in grocery stores. As far as what the department is doing, it's difficult. We don't have any regulatory authority over the supply chain. And so there's not things that we can do there. But one of the things that we are doing is shoring up and looking at in the future, how can we stop future impacts to Nevada's food in the future? Nevada doesn't have a great processing industry. There are some great companies, many of them are in Las Vegas, but when we have a fairly large livestock production in the state, we send most of our livestock out of state to be processed. We have great farming production in the state, but much of that is again sent outside of the state for processing and packaging. And so we have some gaps in our supply chain that we really need to work on and shore up. And so we recognize that as a department. We're working on that not only from a regulatory standpoint, but also from an economic development standpoint, attracting businesses that might want to come to the state to shore up some of those gaps. So I hope I've addressed some of your questions there.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, Ms. Ott, you did. And I just hope that maybe you can compare notes with folks in your position in other states, just to see if they had some of the same issues, if there's just a systemic problem in this, or was it just, as you said, the perfect storm? But luckily, when those small restaurants closed and the casinos closed, food pantries and food banks will be forever grateful that they thought of us and emptied out their fridges and pantries, and anything that was going to expire, they sent it to us, and literally it was coming in one door and going out the other. So it didn't not sit on the shelf very long for us to get it out. So the community in Southern Nevada really did step up and do an excellent job of making sure that no food went to waste. I just could not figure out, being, so close to California, the highway system, transportation, what exactly happened. So thank you very much for the explanation. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Assemblywoman Carlson. With that, we'll go on to Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the presentation, Director Ott. My question has to do with slide 12 when it comes to the senior nutrition programs, and looking at the document, which by the way was very helpful, of the biennial report. I know that there was work that there was outreach for many of our seniors, but when I take a look at how many seniors are being served, this feels very low to me. 5,450 seniors are getting help. So what does the outreach look like for our seniors, especially due to the pandemic and the shut-ins that occurred. What is that outreach and how is that utilized? And I also want to make sure it's noticed, you only have 31 full-time employees in a very large state, so I recognize that as well. So it was just curious as to how that outreach was handled during the last year and then also prior to that.
Sure. Jennifer Ott for the record. Our senior programs are something that over the next couple of years that we're really focusing on. We see that we are not meeting the need there. Two reasons. One is, frankly, the naming of the program is pretty darn terrible. And so we're looking at rebranding that, and so that, you know, that a senior who is interested in supplemental food knows to come to the senior wellness program and not the commodity supplemental food program, because nobody knows what that is, right? So we're working with our federal partners to rebrand that and to make it a higher profile and more recognizable. The second step is that we are administering all of the dollars that we receive. And so we need to get more dollars into our state. And so we are working with the USDA on that. There is a formula that is followed to assess, you know, the need in the state. And we're working on how to express, or, you know, I'm not sure how successful we're going to be on revising the formula, but we can certainly work with our federal partners to tap in either to other funds or to better administer or, you know, some other solution. And so we're looking for more funding. We're looking for more efficient options, more investments in technology, so that, you know, funding doesn't have to go necessarily to old systems, but to actual distribution. And so I agree with you, it's not enough, and it's an area that we're working on.
Follow up, and if I may, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for that answer. I completely agree that part of it is, as Assemblymember Carlton has stated more than a few times, our seniors are incredibly caring and they think somebody else needs it. And so they don't always take it themselves. And so we got to do a better job of messaging that. But with that, what is the outreach for our minority communities, especially our second language communities? Is there an individual on staff that is also concerned or dealing with sometimes the language barriers that gets in the way of providing these essential services and nutritional help for people?
Sure. Jennifer Ott for the record. I am not aware of somebody on our staff, but again, we are, you know, we administer the funds. We work with our partners that are doing the work on the ground for the actual distribution. And so I can certainly look through our partners, you know, the food banks, food pantries, senior centers, to check for language barriers or folks on staff. I'm happy to look into that.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Anderson. I have a brief question, and it falls in line with a theme that I've been asking in many committees. And I was just wondering if you could explain, particularly when it comes to livestock, the plant industry division, have you seen impacts from climate change on the department's work? And if so, what are some of the impacts that you've seen, and what are the department's plans to adapt and mitigate to those changes?
I think I unmuted myself properly. Jennifer Ott for the record. In two areas, the first being, of course, drought. In a drought year, it's incredibly difficult for our producers and for our well, both on the plant side and on the livestock side to operate. There's a lot of accommodations that have to be made, which makes drought reporting and drought predictive monitoring really important. If a farmer knows that their water supplies are going to be cut off on July 4th, they need to make good planting decisions on that. if a livestock producer knows that there's going to be water that's going to run dry, whether on the land or what they have as water rights available to them, they have to make decisions about that. So water is incredibly important. We do have a drought position because of the effect of the pandemic on general fund. We have had, we have very few general funded positions at the department. Most of our positions are federally funded. And so we did have to cut back on some of our drought positions. It was just sort of the reality of the situation. So that's one area. The second, of course, is wildfire. I know everybody mentions it, everybody talks about it. I want to talk about it just on the perspective of the livestock. When you have these major disastrous wildfires sweeping through an area, it's incredibly damaging to those that are grazing on our public lands. Oftentimes, not often, but there's sometimes that livestock get caught up in those fires. The land is not able to be grazed after the wildfire, which creates other problems. And so that is detrimental in an environmental impact. And I would just say, one of the things that we're really looking forward to and really working on with our partners in the state is meaningful measurement when it comes to environmental conditions, meaningful measurement of air quality and having a standardized way that we're measuring whether it's carbon capture or air quality or any of those. I think that it's really important for the agriculture industry to have that meaningful measurement and making sure that we're using there's so many different studies out there and it's really important that we're using all of the same language and same measurements. So.
Wonderful, thank you for that. And I have one last question from Assemblyman Ellison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a real question. It said the plant industry division on page 7, which is mostly the hemp. Wasn't a lot of that destroyed by early frost that did a lot of damage to that? And then my main question is, based on the COVID-19 with the employment base, have you noticed any of the other suppliers like plants, like lettuce, onions, and any of these has been impacted by this that might have an effect on the state? Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer Ott, for the record. For the hemp, there was some frost in some areas, and so that did have an effect. I would say probably the biggest effect of the hemp industry was the CBD prices. It just wasn't, it wasn't an industry that made it profitable for growers to be in. Over the years, I think that even in 2019, at the end of 2019, folks have been holding on to their crop, hoping for bigger prices. And so that has been a problem. In some areas, there were frost, absolutely. To your second question, apologies, what was your second question? On
are we seeing a shortage in crops, we have onions growers, we have carrots, lettuce, some of these other products based on the COVID, and the short of employment, did we see any kind of effect that might create a problem coming up?
Apologies, yes. Jennifer Ott for the record. Not too much, to be honest with you. The producers in the state have been incredibly responsive and, have done a great job in responding to any COVID outbreaks on staff. And so there hasn't been too much of effect of growers, the larger growers. The department was able, with some CARES funds, state allocation of CARES funds, was able to provide PPE and other preventative measures to our farmers and ranchers through our CARES programs. And so that helped and was able to assist in that way, but have been incredibly responsible and responsive to social distancing and mask wearing and other food safety precautions. And, these are folks, especially our larger growers, are folks that are very aware of food safety measures and food safety precautions. And so they didn't have to step up much.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's good news.
Thank you, Mr. Ellison, and thank you again, Director Ott, for the presentation. We very much appreciated it. With that, we'll move on to the other item on our agenda today, which is our first bill hearing. I will open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 75. The bill revises provisions relating to weights and measures. Before we start the bill presentation, I do want to clarify a couple of things for members in the public that's following the meeting. Anyone joining the meeting on camera is either a committee member, staff, bill sponsor, or presenter. Currently, no one else is joining these meetings on video. And the committee may change this policy at some point, but this is how we're conducting our business currently to ensure fairness and equal representation for all. So with that, we will have the administrator go ahead and introduce yourself and present Assembly Bill 75.
Good afternoon, Chairman Watts and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Cadence Matievich. I'm hoping that you can all hear me. Oh, okay.
We can,
Great.
thank you.
Again, Cadence Matievich. I have the privilege of serving as administrator for the Division of Consumer Equitability at the Department of Agriculture. One of the Department of Agriculture's strategic plan goals is to modernize our statutory and regulatory framework. Assembly Bill 75 is part of that effort and is the result of a comprehensive review of Chapter 581 of Nevada Revised Statutes, which governs weights and measures. These updates are intended to align Nevada's weights and measures laws with the uniform laws and regulations established by the National Conference on Weights and Measures and published by the U.S. Department of Commerce National Institute of Standards and Technology's Office of Weights and Measures, better known as NIST-OWM. Sections 2 through 4 of this bill add definitions for certain physical standards used in the installation, adjustment, repair, or calibration of weighing and measuring devices and establishes applicable uses of those standards. Section 5 of the bill provides that the presence of a field reference standard in the possession of a
There
person who is paid to install, make adjustments to, repair,
you go.
or calibrate commercial weighing and measuring equipment creates a rebuttable presumption that the standard is being used for such purpose. The addition of this presumption will assist the agency in enforcing the requirement that any standard used in the installation, adjustment, repair, or calibration of commercial weighing and measuring equipment must be certified by a laboratory that has been qualified by NIST-OWM. Sections 6, 7, and 8 make conforming changes to NRS 581.001, 581.065, and 581.067 to include the words and terms newly established in sections 2 and 3 of this bill. Additionally, Section 8 eliminates the duty of the State Sealer of Consumer Equitability to establish requirements for information relating to the open dating of packaged food. Open dating information includes such terms as sell by, use by, best before, and the like. In July of 2019, the National Conference on Weights and Measures voted to remove open dating of packaged food from within the scope of responsibility for weights and measures officials and deleted it from the uniform regulations contained in NIST Handbook 130, effective January 1st, 2022. This amendment to NIST Handbook 130 came about because it was believed that this subject matter area is more appropriately regulated by health and food safety officials rather than by weights and measures regulators. Section 9 of the bill is intended to clarify that the rebuttable presumption that a weight, measure, or weighing or measuring device present in or about a place from which buying or selling is commonly carried on is regularly used for the commercial business purposes of that place. The addition of the term commercial will assist the agency in enforcing the requirement that any weighing or measuring device being used for a commercial purpose must be licensed by the state sealer of consumer equitability as commercial weighing and measuring equipment, Section 10 makes conforming changes to NRS 561.412 to include all fees and other money collected pursuant to sections 2 through 5 of this bill within those funds, which must be deposited in the state treasury and credited to a separate account of the state general fund for use by the Department of Agriculture. And finally, section 11 sets forth the effective date of the bill. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Administrator Matijevich. We do have a couple of questions. I'll start off with Assemblywoman Titus.
Thank you, Chair Watts. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question. And thank you for the presentation. And I certainly understand where you're going with this bill and do support it, but I do have a question on Section 4. One of my concerns on Section 4, you referred to the handbook number 44, the 2020 edition. And whenever I see a specific date written into a law, I am worried that it becomes antiquated when the next edition comes out. And so I'm wondering why you actually refer to that as opposed to the latest edition, because that's typically where we have gone with some of this in the past, where we don't tag it, so you don't have to come back every couple sessions whenever these books come out if you don't tag it with latest edition. Could you clarify for me, please?
For the record, Cadence Matijevich, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Assemblywoman Titus, I appreciate the question. I will say that we adopt NIST Handbook 44 and other handbooks by reference in Nevada Administrative Code, Chapter 581. And in those adoptions, there is reference that it would be that as there are newer versions of those handbooks published, that they essentially become automatically adopted by reference unless the Board of Agriculture would take action within 60 days of the publication date. So that language does exist within our regulations that allows for future publications to be updated. And perhaps that's something that your legal counsel may be better able, frankly, to address than I as to how this specific citation would continue on as it relates to how we adopt those handbooks.
Thank you. Could we have legal, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Amber, would you like to speak on this?
I would. Thank you, Chair Watts. Alan Ambren for the record. So in this specific situation, that default to where it would be updated to the most recent example would not occur. And that is because the statute supersede regulations. In this specific situation, the statute is specifically referencing the 2020 edition. So if we wanted to update the handbook for this specific situation, we would have to come in and do an amendment to that statute. If we removed that reference, or we just said the latest version, the most recent version, or mimic the language in the regulation, then that regulatory practice would take effect in this situation.
Thank you. That's where I was going with that. That's what my impression has been with numbers like this in the past. So thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Amber, and thank you, Assemblywoman Titus, for the question. Did you have any follow-up? All right. Seeing none, I think we also have a question from Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Administrator. Going to Section 8D, the removed language on the dating of packaged foods, you mentioned that this is generally done by, I think you said Health and Human Services. before we remove that, is that the case now? And we know that in Nevada that's happening?
For the record, Cadence Matievich, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Vice Chair, thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. Yes, back in 2019, when the National Conference on Weights and Measures, which Nevada is a member of, was contemplating removing this from the handbook, I did reach out to health and food safety regulators, both at the State Department of Health and Human Services and also at county health and human services, health districts, to inquire with them if they had concerns about this particular authority being removed from the statute. Essentially, were they relying on this authority that exists for the Department of Agriculture to help assist them with their regulations? And the feedback that we received from them at the time was no, really none of those agencies are relying on that they felt like within their own statutes that give them their authorities and their duties, that they had what they needed to be able to enforce regulations for open dating of packaged food. And much of that guidance is actually set by the FDA. And so many of them follow that. And as we were developing this bill, when the BDR was published, I reached out to them once again, just to be sure that nothing had changed in the time since 2019 and now, and did not hear anything from them that they were concerned about removal of this provision.
Thank you, and thank you for being so thorough with that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cohen. I have a question from Assemblyman Ellison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got one in, it pertains to the seal and what we're doing. One of the questions I've got is, are you going to be changing the standards on how you do gas stations and the pumps and the measurements on the pumps, and is that being done now?
For the record, Cadence Matievich, through you, Mr. Chair, to Assemblyman Ellison, there is nothing within this bill that would change our current practices and procedures with respect to inspecting and certifying any of our weighing and measuring devices in use in the state of Nevada, including retail motor fuel dispensers. The standards for those devices are all included within NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST Handbook 44, which we adopt by reference in Nevada Administrative Code. That handbook is, as I mentioned earlier, updated from time to time. Nevada takes part in the updates to that handbook. We vote on proposals to amend that handbook. And if those provisions are contrary to what we think are best for commercial practices in our state, then we have the opportunity to bring that forward to the Board of Agriculture and adopt something different. But there isn't currently anything in this bill that would affect our practices and procedures with respect to inspecting, validating the accuracy, and sealing accurate weighing and measuring devices in the state.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe at a later date we can discuss, how often they do this and where they're going in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Ellison. I have one quick question. So understanding that a lot of these terms for the standards are being updated, I was just wondering if you could elaborate briefly on the changes in Section 7. So I see that in Section 8, we're adding field reference standards and transfer standards in addition to these primary and secondary standards. And in Section 7, we're taking out the word physical and then using the field reference standards and transfer standards. So I was just wondering if you could speak very briefly to that and what standards wouldn't be included in that and kind of what the thought or justification behind that is.
For the record, Cadence Matievich, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman, and I will do my best to be brief. So as I said at the beginning of my presentation, the addition of the terms field reference standards and transfer standards are terms that have been newly developed and included essentially in the terminology that's being used in the metrology industry. And the metrology is the science of measurement. And previously, really, there have been primary and secondary standards were the predominant terms in use. And there became a concern that the term secondary standard, which really is something that is typically used in a laboratory, a primary standard, frankly, is something that the state of Nevada's primary standards are issued to us by the U.S. Department of Commerce. And they were issued to us in 1972. And we use them to calibrate our secondary standards, which we use in our laboratories to compare the physical artifacts, and all of these are physical artifacts that are then used out in the field. And so within the metrology industry or science, they've developed additional terms to more robustly, I guess, flesh out the full inventory of types of standards that are used and what they're used for. And so this is us, Nevada, updating our definition and terminology to include those newly defined terms that are being used in the handbooks and used in the industry. And so really, we're not leaving anything out by the addition of these terms. We're not meaning to take anything away from what is currently being used. It's really expanding the dictionary of terms that's used. And so that as we are working with agents who are out in the field doing installation, repair, and adjustments, when we're talking about the standards that they use, we're using the appropriate terms, their field reference standards or their transfer standards, rather than calling them secondary standards, which are generally really only used in the laboratory.
Wonderful. Thank you for the clarification, Administrator Matievich. Not being an expert in metrology, the clarification is welcome as the members of the committee weigh this bill. Does anyone else, do any other members have questions? Okay, hearing none, I will now open up testimony on Assembly Bill 75. Again, in order to provide testimony, you must register online on the legislative website, where you'll receive a phone number, meeting ID, and instructions to join the meeting. For those who wish to testify, please clearly state and spell your name and limit your testimony to 2 minutes. We'll be timing each speaker to make sure everyone's given a fair opportunity to speak. With that, we will begin testimony in support of Assembly Bill 75. Staff from Broadcast Production Services, are there any callers in the queue?
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
All right, thank you. With that, we will open it for opposition on Assembly Bill 75. Do we have anybody in opposition, BPS?
Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. And is there anyone wishing to testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 75?
Chair, there are no callers in the neutral position at this time.
All right. Thank you very much, Broadcast Production Services, for assisting us with that. Unless there are any closing remarks from the department. All right.
No, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to present the bill today.
Thank you. And hopefully we can work out to ensure that these standards and the books that are being referenced continue to be updated moving forward. So with that, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 75. And we will now move on to the last item on our agenda today, which is public comment. As a reminder, to provide public comment, you must register online on the legislative website, where you will receive the information to participate. And as with testimony, we will be limiting any public comment to 2 minutes. Will Broadcast Production Services please let me know if any callers are currently in the queue.
Chair, there are currently no callers in queue at this time.
All right, we're gonna wait just 1 minute to see if there's anybody that would like to participate but was on a delay. All right, do we have anybody in the queue, BPS?
Chair, there are still no callers in the line.
Well, thank you very much for your assistance in helping us make these virtual meetings work. And with that, that concludes our meeting for today. We'll meet again on Wednesday, February 17th at 4 p.m., where we'll continue to hear bills. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.